They're going crazy. Good stuff.
All the shit going on right now, bro.
And you had quite an adventure, it sounds like.
I did have an adventure. It was a little bit of a sidetrack.
Sometimes I might meet somebody out and just invite them to, we're gonna go grab a bite to eat. But in that case, it's like, I wanna go eat. And then also make your own fun little event where there's other business people and just drop that out there and then they'll pick up on it. What's up, guys? Yo, yo.
Yo. Oh my God.
What's up, bro? What up, man?
How are you?
Good, man.
Good to see you again.
You too. So, just getting up here. So just thinking of the history, the best events, the legendary events, the things that have happened, you know, reflecting on that just as I walk in the room. What's up, bro? What's up, bro? Hey, what's up, guys? Owen! 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 Yeah! Thank you guys, thank you. So we're gonna be shooting into a video today on the topic of how to make cash, how to get spiritually tapped in, and how to use your social skills in order to get there. And as we go in the video, you might notice that I'm in Chicago right now. You got the Trump Tower over there. We're sitting here on one of the many, many, many beautiful bridges right out here in Chicago. And why I'm here is actually do a completely free event this weekend. So if you're somebody who wants to attend a completely free event, and this is the kind of event that would normally be about $5 grand to attend, it's gonna go way deep and help you to build a huge network. We're gonna go out at night, it's gonna be awesome. Make sure that you click the link below and I'll see you out here in Chicago. Okay, I'd urge you to fly in for it. It is unbelievable being at a free event. In the meantime though, enjoy this video. It's gonna go very, very, very deep. And I'm excited to see you soon. Let's do it. So in this video, my goal is to show you why you just speaking logically and you being so intelligent, you having this big, powerful intellect does not mean that you're as smart and intelligent as you think you are. In fact, what I'm going to suggest in this video is if your only capacity to communicate is via logic, you're actually somebody who is unintelligent, or rather, you're over-optimized for one type of intelligence because you're missing other types of intelligence. So what we're going to be doing in this video is explaining to you the intelligence of emotion, the intelligence of status and hierarchy, the intelligence of spirituality, the intelligence of sexuality or love. And what I'm going to try to do is expand your mind a little bit so that when you're communicating with somebody and you say to yourself, why can't they just be more logical? Why do they have to be so crazy? You know, are they dumb? What's wrong with them? You start to realize that, wait a minute, maybe they're a little bit more sophisticated than you think. In fact, maybe they're even a little bit more intelligent than you. Now, that's up for you to decide, but what I'm going to show you in this video is how to understand these different languages and how to recognize different potentials that you didn't even know you have. In the process of this, what I think is going to happen is you're going to be able to relate to people much, much better. And when you have empathy for people, when you can relate to people and speak their language, what winds up happening is it increases your capacity to lead. And a lot of the crazy things that are happening to you, the kind of bad responses that you're getting, will completely turn around and you'll have a much, much better life. And other people will also have a much, much better life around you. Let's do it. There's sort of a middle ground that you want to find. I think that there's a lot of people that run away from people that love them, and they're worse off for it. You know, I've seen people that, you know, claiming standards and boundaries left my life, and they'll say their life got better, but you look them in the eye, you know that's not true. So I want you to imagine like you're playing a symphony, and rather than just doing this sort of a rudimentary exchange of information, you're actually playing a piano with all sorts of different notes, or an entire orchestra with violins playing and drums playing and so on and so forth. So if you're somebody who's addicted to just speaking logically, that might frustrate you because you're like, how come I can't just get the information across? We're at point A, we're trying to get to point B, I'm cool, I want to show the other person that I am cool. I will relate that by saying, I have this much money, I've gone to these places, I can help you to this amount. Why can't that be enough? Why can't that be enough? Is basically what you're thinking, okay? And what I'm trying to show you is that this is a little bit more like being the conductor of an orchestra, of your different faculties or your different potentials, or maybe playing an instrument. Think about it a little bit more like that. So I want you to imagine that you have, again, your emotional intelligence. You have hierarchical, like the language of emotion, which reflects your emotional intelligence. The language of hierarchy, the language of spirituality, okay? The language of sensuality, the language of sex. And there's many, many different languages that are being exchanged that are basically emanating out of your communication. And so if you're somebody who supposedly you claim to be oh so smart, oh, you're smart, right? You're so smart. Why can't these dummies just grasp your intelligence? Realize that you're basically somebody who's just hitting the same note over and over and over. And while that might be a note that you value very, very much, other people actually view you as limited if you don't understand these other forms of intelligence and these other forms of communication, these other ways of relating, okay? Now, the first one that we'll cover is emotion. So let's say, for example, that we're communicating right now and I'm trying to get you this information that I'm trying to relay to you. Now, if I'm just speaking purely from logic and no emotion, we're gonna remove the tone out of my voice. So give me a second, just bear with me. So now what's gonna happen is I would say, hey, it's Owen. We're here in Chicago. I'm gonna give you the information that you need to get from point A to point B. Maybe if I haven't said, it's Owen, and I'm gonna give you the information to get from point A to point B. Okay, so there's no emotion in it, okay? So what I've done is, when I'm speaking to you, what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to basically self-generate whatever emotion that is that I want you to feel. If I want you to feel happy, I have to go into my mind, in effect, like being a meditator, and I have to self-generate that emotion of happiness. Now, some people might say, how do you do that? To be honest, I kind of make it kind of just similar to, we're out in public, but, a little bit kind of similar to just, right? Where it's just basically you pumping your own state, okay? When you're doing that, what are you doing? You're just basically simulating an emotion in your mind till you pop. Men and women both know how to do it. Well, if you could do that, then clearly you have a lot more state control, a lot more emotional state control than you think that you do. So it's basically just, you kind of just self-generate this emotion, and like a pit bull, you kind of just clamp onto it. So the emotions that I might be using in one of my videos could be, say this video could be happy, but it could also be urgency. I have an urgency for you to change. It could be that of focus. And what I do is I have to self-generate that, and then I relate to you. Now, if you're a man, as an example, and you find it frustrating that women are more connected to their emotions, if that frustrates you, well, what I'd say to you is, why don't you have some empathy and do an audit of where they are coming from and what their life experience is like, how they might feel, right? So your job, the way that you might feel would be, it's kind of like you're trying to build these sort of, your own little empire and have the kind of, the metaphorical, if not literal, castle walls where you could protect your loved ones, right? Your priority, your goal is to protect your loved ones, right? So that they're safe and so they're fed and so they can prosper. Well, if you're speaking to a woman, and every woman's different, we can't generalize to every single woman, but traditionally, if we're just speaking in traditional terms, her goal could be, for example, as an example, again, every woman's different, but as an example, traditionally could be to nurture children. And one thing that you'll learn, I'm a father, is that the mother of my kids, she is the emotional leader with my children. And she's always tickling them and hugging them and making them feel nurtured. And, when they're little babies, skin-on-skin contact, breastfeeding. And so her ability to nurture is her priority. So you might feel like you're trying to build your empire, and then you look at someone whose priority is to nurture, and you're actually lacking in empathy, which a great leader should have empathy. Somebody who has the capacity for abstract thinking should have the capacity for empathy. And you're being very, very selfish, which being selfish can be good sometimes, but it makes you a bad leader because you're not even understanding how to lead or to relate to people or how to speak their language, because if somebody else's priority is nurturing and creating a beautiful home environment, to create vibes and to create energy, well, then if you don't understand that language, then you're not able to relate to them. And as a leader, you have to understand how to relate to where someone's coming from. Look, if I'm being honest with you, and this will sound crazy, the purpose of my videos is not to help you with just your social life. It is also to help you, and this is just my take, and you don't need to even understand this right now. I'm helping in my goal to get you closer to God, and to get you to where you have a spiritual awakening, and to get it to where society doesn't just unravel. But I don't just come to you when you're somebody who's not a millionaire yet, who doesn't have a significant other yet, or a great dating life yet, who doesn't have a social life yet, who hasn't traveled yet, and go, just get closer to God, get closer to God. I don't just start doing that to you. Rather, what I do is I teach things that represent where you're at currently in your journey that to me seem like a joke and are so ridiculously easy. I don't even understand why somebody doesn't get that. And I try to meet you where you're at, and I try to speak your language, and then what I do is I embed lessons within that. So in the same way, if you're relating to somebody whose primary modality for communication is emotion, then what you can do is you can learn to be a leader, learn to communicate with emotion, and then from there you can embed showing them how to get from point A to point B. And that could be using vocal tone, that could be using the transference of energy by the law of state transference. People have mirror neurons, they feel what you feel, and so on and so forth, and that is just you speaking another language. So in the same way when you go up and you're relaying information, you can simply make a decision to go to your body, lead with whatever kind of emotion it is that you would like them to experience, that you feel would allow you to lead them and relate to them better, and then that allows you to use a different potential that you have. So really, at this point, we have two instruments. Logic is being exchanged, and emotions being exchanged. And simply by realizing this, you'll stop being so frustrated with, why can't the logic be enough? Why is it not enough? Why do I need to communicate with this emotion? Ooga booga 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 booga. You know, instead of that, you can actually begin to appreciate where somebody else is coming from and to meet them where they're at. So the next language that I want you to think about is the language of status, or what you might call the language of hierarchy, language of value, social value. And I know that this language might frustrate you because it's like, why can't I just go hooga booga booga? This is information. Information confers status. And why status even matter? I get it. Human beings, we've had status a part of us since the beginning of time. It's not going anywhere, at least until some kind of singularity or some crazy whatever you'd call that. So the next language that we're going to talk about is the language of status. Language of hierarchy, the language of social value. And in the same way that we're using our orchestra, we're relaying information, we're relaying emotion, we are also relaying status. And status is related to everything from voice tonality, vocal projection, body language, to things like the underlying frame of an interaction. Who is more certain? Who is actually able to lay back? Who is reacting to the other person less? And things like text messaging, it could be, are you sending some long, self-qualifying paragraph text, or are you sending something a little bit more concise, although maybe it would make sense to send a longer one in certain cases. So there's also an underlying communication happening all the time of status. You've got to be aware of it. And if you fail to be aware of it, well, then you're kind of missing out. And what'll wind up happening is maybe you're giving the information and people, they kind of appreciate the information. Maybe you're giving the emotion and they do like the emotion. But if it's not coming from somebody who has status, it is not viewed as nearly as important to that person. So when you're relaying the information, they're getting the download of what it is that you need them to hear. When you're giving the emotion, you're being proactive in helping to shape their experience of what they're feeling. And then when you're making a proactive effort to communicate with the language of status, hierarchy, and social value, then what you're doing is you're holding the tension and you're holding their selective focus, their RAS, reticular activation system. Basically what happens is that when you have status, people will focus in on what it is that you're saying. It creates tension. It creates magnetism. People are drawn towards you. Now, the language of status and hierarchy is way too in-depth for us to cover here in this video. I've got countless other videos talking about it. Mini courses, full courses, classes on it. I'll take you out in person and show you how it works. Okay, I do all this stuff. But, the very, very, very short version of it would be eye contact would be unwavering and not trying too hard, not afraid of the other person. Body language would be willing to take up space, but also relaxed. Movement in the body would not have neurotic holding patterns to where you look like you're tense all the time, but you're able to express yourself freely. When you're speaking, you're able to take pauses at certain points, which creates vacuums and causes other people to want to lead into what you're saying. You are probably more certain with what you're saying and in your own beliefs than the other person is, because you realize that hierarchy basically confers the ability to dictate reality. So as a result of that, you're not so much looking to the other person to dictate what it is that you think. You're leading situations, or you're telling people that you want them to take initiative and they're doing so to qualify to you. And you know, you're somebody where people are probably laughing more at your jokes than you are at theirs, but if they meet a certain criteria and a bar that you've set, then you laugh very, very much at theirs as well. You also might compliment, but in doing so, you're showing that you're the judge, and so on and so forth. In any social interaction, there's one person reacting more to the other person, and that person's reacting to them. There's countless other ways that status is being conferred, but just realize, the point of this video is not to look at every single element of status. Rather, the point of this video is to examine the instrument or the orchestra type of concept and just realize, okay, I'm communicating right now. I'm talking to somebody right now. I'm giving information. I'm providing emotion. I'm also creating tension and magnetism and holding and fixating their RAS and putting value on what it is that I'm saying by understanding the language of status. So I think you're seeing the general direction this is going. We're going to go deeper into Chicago, and we'll go into the next language now.
We talked about how to be interesting by being interested. Could you talk more about how to kind of engage somebody and listen and kind of add to the fun?
I think you have to be clear about what it is that you're doing. I think when you're first meeting someone, if you listening to them is provoking them to want to speak more and self-qualify to you via talking, that's great because they're self-qualifying to you. If it's just them running frame on you and you're the little lapdog, then no. Okay, now the next one is a little bit more subtle, and this is something that unless you're aware of it is going to be way, way, way over your head. And for anybody who's not getting this, you're really missing out, and most people don't get it. What I want you to do is read the book The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And what he talks about is being present to the moment. So that is the next language, the next communication, the next way of relating is, what Eckhart Tolle would say is, the more that we get into the now, the more that we connect to our higher power, the more that we connect to high vibration energy, or you might even say that we connect to God. Whatever that you want to call that, that's up to you. I don't really care. But understand that people that are more elevated, what you might call spiritually, they are actually sensing the extent to which you are trapped inside your head, being run by your ego, as opposed to being very, very present and kind of tapped in. And the way that you can see this from people, there's many different ways, is one, if they're ego-driven, are they trying to control everything all the time? Or are they able to actually release and let things go? Okay, that's called the control muscle versus the release muscle. Now again, this video is more to get you think about the orchestra component, so I'm not going to go super, super deep on this. I've gone way, 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 way deep in other videos on this. But basically, if you're trying to control everything, it creates a dense, uptight, kind of more frenetic energy. Versus if you're just releasing, here's the paradox of it. The more that you release, the more control that you actually gain. Because you tap in, you have more energy coming to you. You have better discernment, okay, because you can see the world better when you're not trying to control everything. That's a very deep topic. And then from there, you're going to have more power. Okay, you might have heard there's a book by David R. Hawkins called Power versus Force. So the extent to which you are present to the moment and resonating with being positive, resonating with being free, resonating with being in release, resonating with vibing out and being in a flow state, that is another language that somebody who is elevated in that way is going to be getting from you. And if you're somebody who's very, very much trapped in ego and negativity and pain body and trauma, well, you're going to attract other people like that. Like attracts like, and light attracts light, right? So in other words, negative energy wants to spread, right? They say LVE, low vibration energy, wants to spread. High vibration energy wants to spread. If you're somebody who's very, very positive, you're going to attract other positive people. If you're somebody who is spiritually elevated, you are likely to attract other spiritually elevated people. And if you're somebody who's in density and pain body and trauma, that is also another language, and you're going to attract other people that will tend to bounce off of you and react off of you and sort of ensnare each other in this sort of weird trauma, negative energy spider web of ego exchange and ego friction and finding separation via each other and using trauma as a way to stay separated from God. Because it makes it to where you're not present because you're reacting, not responding. Okay, super deep topic, but let's just look at it within the context of what my goal here was, which is the orchestra, the language, right? So you're communicating information, you are dictating emotion, you're also showing how much status that you have via your communication, but then paradoxically, you're also showing the extent to which you're plugged into the now, or spiritual, or untraumatized, or have resolved your trauma. And this different type of communication is happening all the time. And what's going to wind up happening is if you're somebody who's just stuck at logic, well, then you're probably going to attract a bunch of very nerdy men, a couple nerdy women. If you're somebody who has logic and emotion, Well, now you can actually have a good time with people, and that broadens who it is that you can bring in your life. Then if you're somebody who has all of that plus social value, now you've got other people chasing you and wanting your attention and valuing your attention. And then if you add in the spiritual component, that high vibe energy component, now you're attracting the people that you want. In other words, other positive people. You see where I'm going with this? Now, the last kind of communication that I'm going to throw onto here is sexuality or sensuality. And that is it's entirely its own language as well. So we'll kind of wrap with that one. And hopefully what's going to happen is that when you go out this weekend, you're going to have an entirely new framework to think about this. And you'll be able to kind of interact with people and see what's going on. But let's wrap up with this last language. And it's going to tie it all together right now. Okay, so the last language that we'll be talking about in this conceptual framework is going to be that of sensuality. And the way that I think about sensuality is, in effect, potency or genesis, or you might almost say the cup runneth over. In other words, you know, let's say that you see someone walking down the street and there's a lot of curves and there's fat in the right places. Or let's say that there's a muscle in the right places. Well, that is something that's sensual. But I think what can happen is that we get caught up in that. Oh, if it's a woman, I don't have those, like the giant bosom or the fat ass or whatever, right? Or the guy says, oh, I don't have the super broad shoulders or the giant biceps. What do I do? And what I'd encourage you to do is get a little bit more creative when it comes to that excess, because in truth, energy can manifest in many different forms. So in my case, because I'm not super tall and I'm not super jacked, for me, what it comes in is an excess of energy. And that doesn't mean to be frenetic or to be hyper, because that can come across as self-qualifying. But that excess of energy could even be a very, very deep groundedness or peace, creating a very, very potent vacuum that draws people in. Or it could be projecting your voice. Or it could be the way that you're using your body. And the big one that I think is just so big is also showing that freedom, right? Because when you think of sensuality, you think of potency, you think of that energy of genesis. In the same way that a sperm and an egg are the start of something, you are that kind of fount that comes from beyond the veil, that energy that comes out, that creates life. You're the creator of life. But that creation of life, both coming in that potency and excess of energy, it also comes in things like rhythm. Rhythm and not being so uptight. Okay, so that's another one. So why are things like dance or even things like public speaking or being a DJ or performance or using your body in the right way, why is that the language of sensuality? Well, and there's so many different versions of it. Okay, so many non-stereotypical versions of it. In my view, what it is that it shows that you're not kind of like, you'd almost say that society is divided up almost into like the Oompa Loompas who kind of just keep it running, but are not the people that are actually creating the new life. And then there's the people, the blessed ones, that are creating the new life. And the person who is creating the new life, they've had a little bit more fun and niceness and good emotions, and they've been fed in so many different directions, all that validation and good emotions and physical touch and whatnot. And what happens, and this is kind of abstract, but it winds up, and very abstract here, so you gotta follow me, it winds up loosening up all of your internal knots. So some people might call that a neurotic holding pattern. When you are too logical, what it implies is that you are one of these social Oompa Loompas. You are one of the people who is kind of holding everything together, but you're not Willy Wonka, the leader in that environment. So in other words, look where this is, right? You've got to become Willy Wonka, but you know my point, right? Somebody who does not have neurotic holding patterns, who hasn't had to sit there in their life just grinding and toiling and becoming the king of the betas, right? Because that's what we think of as entrepreneurship. It's like, the king of the beta. Somebody who hasn't had to do that is living in this kind of flow state reality where they have rhythm, they have excess, they have potency, they have energy, they're outside of their head because they haven't been judged, and because they're getting a lot of attention and validation, they feel good, and here's the main key that ties together this entire video, they feel good. You now take on this new identity, you feel good exactly where you are. Because here's what you need to understand, I'm gonna wrap with this. That need to have all this logic, what does logic imply? It implies that you're one of the societal Oompa Loompas, And it implies that you're the kind of person where you're not happy where you are. Fundamentally, logic, as beautiful as it is, and I think it's important to have a very, very potent logical component to you to make money and whatnot, because society is not just going to prop you up just because you're a breeder anymore. But it's important to understand that the need to be logical implies that you're not happy where you are, and that lack of happiness with the present moment, that lack of happiness where you are, drives you to become hyper logical to get out of the situation. Once you are happy in the situation, that logic turns off, and you go into a deep level of enjoyment, of receiving, and as you receive, that creates an excess of energy, of potency, which then comes out within the form of rhythms and not having neurotic holding patterns, okay? So that is a very logical explanation of something that's actually quite illogical, but actually, fundamentally, is actually logical if you understand it. So, in summary, these are just the different languages that I want you to understand are being played. And when you're out there, you might be saying, oh, why can't they just get my logic? They are so dumb! Not like me, who is smart and logical and intellectual. And yet you are failing to use your powerful intellect to understand that there's a lot of different communication taking place. We call that subcommunication. Lots of different ways of relating. You've got to meet people where they're at and also show them that you have the capacity to even understand in order to relate to them. And when you do, what winds up happening is you are playing your own personal orchestra, and all of a sudden you're relaying the logical information, you are controlling the emotion and being proactive in the role of the emotion that's being laid out. You're showing that whatever it is that you're communicating of that logic and of that emotion has value because of hierarchy. You're also attracting the right kind of people because you are high vibe. And now all of a sudden, you have that beautiful rhythm and potency and excess and joy for where you are, which comprises sensuality. And just putting together those base level pieces, I think it's gonna change your life. I think you're gonna love it very, very much. And what I would invite you to do is to go out this weekend, meet people, engage with them, and take a minute to have empathy for where they're at and what it is that they expect from you. I think when you do that, you're gonna realize that they are gonna wanna make you very, very happy because you made them happy, and your life is about to get a lot more exciting if you know what I mean. Anyway, we're actually wrapping up an amazing, amazing program here in Chicago. It was so incredible, so beautiful, so happy to be out here in one of our classic shooting locations. I hope that you enjoyed the video. I kind of challenged myself to make a quick, tight one to the point because I'm catching an airplane in about 5 minutes from now. So that got me to shut up. And I hope you enjoyed it very much. We'll be back more soon. Peace.